I'm Abigail Mitchell, 29, a medical data analyst in Boston, with a secret I've kept for years. Growing up, my parents always favored my sister Sarah. No matter what happened, she was golden while I was invisible. 3 years ago, I started sending my parents $5,000 monthly when they hit financial trouble. They thought it came from Sarah. Last month at their anniversary dinner, my dad shouted, "You only sent 60 cents?" I whispered, "That was me sending the money." Mom snapped, "Stop stealing her credit." So I stopped the payments. Before I tell you what happened next, where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family who couldn't see your worth. Growing up in suburban Chicago with my parents Richard and Diane Mitchell was an exercise in constantly feeling second best. From my earliest memories, our family dynamic was crystal clear. My sister Sarah, 3 years younger, was the sun around which our family orbited, while I was merely a distant planet, necessary but unremarkable. Our childhood home was filled with framed photos of Sarah's dance recitals, softball games, and school plays. My academic certificates and science fair ribbons lived in a drawer in my desk. This wasn't an accident or oversight. It was a pattern established early and reinforced daily. I remember my 10th birthday when I received practical gifts, clothes for school, a new backpack, and a dictionary. 3 months later, Sarah's birthday celebration included a lavish party with a bouncy castle, a professional magician, and a custom-made cake that must have cost hundreds. When I mentioned the disparity, my mother patted my head and said, "Abigail, you're the practical one. You don't care about these frivolous things." But I did care. I just learned not to show it. In 6th grade, I spent weeks building an elaborate solar system model for the science fair. The night before submission, Sarah accidentally knocked it over while running through the house. Half the planets shattered. When I burst into tears, my father scolded me for overreacting and making Sarah feel bad. No one suggested she apologize. Instead, I stayed up all night rebuilding what I could, my eyes puffy from crying, while Sarah watched TV in the living room. My mother had different standards for our responsibilities, too. By 13, I was cooking dinner twice a week, doing my own laundry, and babysitting Sarah whenever our parents went out. Sarah, even as a teenager, was given minimal chores because she was sensitive and needed time for her creativity. She spent that free time talking on the phone with friends while I studied at the kitchen table, determined that academic success would be my ticket to freedom. When I received straight A's, it was expected. When Sarah brought home C's and B's, our parents celebrated her improvement with ice cream outings. They attended every one of Sarah's choir performances, but missed my debate team finals because someone had to be there for Sarah's rehearsal. High school intensified these dynamics. I joined every academic club, earned top grades, and secured a position as editor of the school newspaper. Not for recognition at home. I'd long given up on that, but because these achievements were mine alone, things my parents couldn't minimize or give away to Sarah. My acceptance to Northwestern University on a partial scholarship was met with lukewarm congratulations, followed quickly by concerns about how they would afford the remaining tuition. When Sarah decided on an expensive private college in California 2 years later, they remortgaged the house without hesitation, proud of their artist pursuing her dreams. During college, I worked 3 jobs, mornings at a coffee shop, evenings at the library, and weekends as a research assistant. I came home for brief visits where conversation inevitably centered on Sarah's adventures in California, her interesting friends, and her promising auditions for student films. My biochemistry research position barely warranted a passing question. After graduation, I chose Boston for its vibrant healthcare industry, but also for its distance from Chicago. The 983 miles between us allowed me to breathe. During those early years of independence, I called home weekly. The first 10 minutes were updates about my life. The remaining 30 were about Sarah's latest pursuits. I learned to keep my achievements small in these conversations. Mentioning promotions or raises only led to requests to help Sarah with rent or headshots for her budding acting career. I dated occasionally but kept relationships superficial. How could I explain my family to someone? My parents have another daughter they actually love wasn't exactly first date material. Instead, I poured myself into my career, finding validation in the meritocracy of professional success. Unlike family love, workplace advancement had clear rules and measurable outcomes. By 26, I had established myself as a rising talent in healthcare data analytics. My name appeared on industry publications. I presented at conferences. I built a reputation as someone who could translate complex medical data into actionable insights for improving patient care. These accomplishments filled the emotional void my family had created, at least partially. In Boston, I was valuable. In Boston, I mattered. 7 years into my career at Meditech Solutions, I had climbed from entry-level analyst to senior data strategist. My specialty in predictive modeling for patient outcomes had saved hospitals millions and, more importantly, improved countless lives. At 28, I was the youngest senior analyst in company history, managing a team of 12 and reporting directly to the VP of operations. My financial situation reflected this success. I purchased a small but elegant condo in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood, with tall windows overlooking the Charles River. I invested wisely, building a substantial emergency fund and retirement portfolio. For the first time in my life, I felt secure, independent, worthy. Then came the call that would upend everything. It was a Tuesday evening in April when my father's name flashed on my phone screen. Unusual, since our communication typically happened during my Sunday calls to them. Something had to be wrong. Abigail, his voice sounded strained, lacking its usual confidence. We need to talk about something important. Over the next 20 minutes, he explained how their retirement investments had been devastated by the recent economic downturn. The financial advisor they'd trusted had made several high-risk moves that backfired spectacularly. Their retirement savings had dwindled to almost nothing. At 62 and 60, they were facing the prospect of working indefinitely with no financial safety net. We wouldn't ask if we had any other option, he said, an unfamiliar humility in his tone. We've already cut back on everything we can. I asked about Sarah. Wasn't she helping? The question was met with uncomfortable silence before my father admitted that Sarah was finding her footing in Los Angeles. Translation: at 26, she was still pursuing acting without steady income, occasionally booking commercial work while my parents subsidized her apartment and headshots. Despite years of emotional neglect, I couldn't ignore their situation. That night, I calculated what I could reasonably contribute without compromising my own financial security. The figure was substantial, $5,000 monthly. It would postpone my plans to start my own healthcare consulting firm, but it was doable. When I called back with my offer, my father's relief was palpable. You always were good with money, Abigail, he said, the closest thing to a compliment he'd given me in years. Then came the caveat. We'd appreciate if you kept this arrangement between us. No need to make Sarah feel bad about not being in a position to help yet. I agreed, not because I wanted to protect Sarah's feelings, but because I didn't want her to know I was capable of such generosity. It was a private victory, proof that I had succeeded despite never being the favorite. I set up automatic transfers to their account, scheduled for the first of each month. The first payment confirmation gave me an unexpected sense of power. I was the provider now, the responsible one, the successful one, even if they didn't publicly acknowledge it. 3 months into this arrangement, my mother mentioned during our Sunday call how Sarah's help has been such a blessing. Confused, I asked what she meant. Oh, she didn't tell you? She's been sending money to help us out. So thoughtful of her to share her commercial earnings. My stomach dropped. Sarah had somehow taken credit for my financial support. I wanted to correct this misconception immediately but remembered my agreement with my father. Instead, I asked carefully, how much has she been helping? She doesn't want us to discuss the specific amount, my mother replied, but it's making all the difference. We're so proud of how well she's doing in Los Angeles. That night, I called Sarah directly, something I rarely did. When I carefully broached the subject, she laughed it off. I just let them believe what they want, she said casually. It makes them happy to think I'm successful, and they mentioned money was coming in from somewhere. I didn't explicitly take credit, I just didn't correct them. I should have confronted her, demanded she tell our parents the truth. Instead, I swallowed my anger and resentment, adding it to the mountain of similar feelings I'd accumulated over a lifetime. I continued the payments. For 3 years, this arrangement persisted. My parents' financial situation stabilized. They occasionally mentioned Sarah's generosity during our conversations, heaping praise on her selflessness while remaining oblivious to the true source of their security. During Sarah's visits home, which she could now afford thanks to the money I was saving her, she apparently played along with their misconception, accepting their gratitude for my sacrifice. Meanwhile, I received no thanks, no acknowledgement, not even awareness of what I was doing for them. The $180,000 I had provided over those 3 years was invisible, just as I had always been. The resentment grew, a slow-building pressure behind a dam of lifelong compliance and self-silencing. Each monthly transfer became more difficult. Each Sunday call where they gushed about Sarah's latest audition or weekend trip to San Diego, trips she could take because I was subsidizing our parents, eroded my resolve to maintain this arrangement indefinitely. Something would have to give. I just didn't know it would happen so publicly, so painfully, and so soon. Last month marked my parents' 35th wedding anniversary. Despite my reluctance to return to Chicago, I booked a flight and a hotel room for the weekend celebration. I even purchased an expensive silver photo frame, custom engraved with their names and anniversary date, containing a professionally restored version of their wedding photo that had been damaged years ago. My father had selected Gibson's Steakhouse for the occasion, one of Chicago's most expensive restaurants. Only the best for this milestone, he'd said during our planning call. I wondered briefly if he realized I was indirectly paying for this lavish dinner through my monthly contributions, but pushed the thought aside. This weekend wasn't about me or my feelings. I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, dressed in a navy blue cocktail dress I'd purchased specifically for the occasion. The maitre d' led me to our reserved table where my parents were already seated, my father in a charcoal suit that looked new, my mother wearing an elegant black dress and the pearl necklace I'd sent for her birthday last year, though she thanked Sarah for it at the time. "Abigail, you made it," my mother said, standing for a brief hug that smelled of familiar Chanel perfume. My father nodded approvingly at my appearance before checking his watch. "Sarah's running a bit late," he explained. "Traffic from O'Hare is terrible tonight." Of course Sarah was making an entrance. Some things never changed. We ordered drinks while waiting, sparkling water for me, an expensive Cabernet for my parents. The conversation centered on their friends' recent activities, neighborhood changes, and gentle complaints about Chicago weather. Not once did they ask about my life in Boston, my recent promotion to Director of Analytics, or the industry award I'd received last month. 25 minutes later, Sarah swept into the restaurant like a gust of wind, all movement and noise. Her blonde hair was freshly highlighted, her designer dress likely new. She apologized dramatically for her tardiness, blaming airport delays and incompetent rideshare drivers. My parents immediately perked up, their faces transforming from polite contentment to genuine joy. "Sarah, sweetheart, you look gorgeous," my mother exclaimed, rising for a proper embrace. "The California sun agrees with you," my father added, beaming with pride. Sarah hugged them both before turning to me with a casual, "Hey, Abby," using the nickname she knew I disliked. I offered a tight smile in return. Once seated, Sarah dominated the conversation with stories of Hollywood near misses and name-dropping celebrities she'd allegedly encountered at coffee shops. Her anecdotes grew increasingly exaggerated. A casual elevator encounter with a B-list actor somehow evolved into a potential collaboration on an upcoming project. My parents absorbed every word, asking eager questions and expressing unwavering confidence in her inevitable breakthrough. "It's all about persistence," my father said sagely. "Your big break is just around the corner." "And talent," my mother added. "Our Sarah has always had that special something." I sipped my water and maintained my polite expression, a skill perfected over decades. When the waiter came to take our orders, my father selected the most expensive items for his girls, as if we were still children needing his guidance. I noticed him hesitate briefly when seeing the prices, but recover quickly. The monthly transfers had made him comfortable spending again. During the main course, I attempted to join the conversation by mentioning the healthcare algorithm my team had developed that was helping identify early-stage kidney disease in underserved populations. "That's nice, dear," my mother said without making eye contact, before immediately turning to Sarah. "Now tell us more about that commercial audition." "The national one." The pattern was so familiar it almost didn't hurt anymore. Almost. The evening progressed predictably until dessert arrived. My father proposed a toast to another 35 years together, and we clinked glasses. Then he turned to Sarah with misty eyes. "And I want to say how proud we are of you, sweetheart. Not just for your pursuing your dreams, but for your incredible generosity during our rough patch. Not many young people would support their parents so selflessly." Sarah had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, but accepted the praise with a practiced humble smile. "It's nothing, really. Family is everything." The waiter delivered the check in a discreet leather folder. My father reached for it, but I intercepted it. "Please, let me handle this," I said. "It's your anniversary." My father protested weakly, but allowed me to insert my credit card. When the waiter returned for my signature, my father asked suddenly, "So how is your financial situation these days, Abigail? We worry you might be struggling since we never hear about your sending money home like your sister." The question caught me off guard. I looked up from the receipt, pen frozen mid-signature. "I'm doing fine," I replied carefully. "Good, good," he nodded, then chuckled. For a moment there, I thought maybe you could only afford to send 60 cents or something. He was joking, but the comment stung. 3 years and $180,000 of unacknowledged support flashed before my eyes. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice quiet but steady. "The monthly deposits," he clarified, waving his hand dismissively. "Sarah's been our financial angel. 5,000 a month, like clockwork. Saved our retirement, really." The restaurant seemed to grow silent around me, though logically I knew the ambient noise continued. My pulse pounded in my ears. "That was me," I said quietly, the words slipping out before I could stop them. My mother frowned. "What are you talking about, Abigail?" "The monthly payments. $5,000. First of each month. That's been coming from me, not Sarah." My father's expression hardened. "That's not funny, Abigail. Sarah's been transparent about helping us." Sarah herself remained conspicuously silent, suddenly fascinated by the remnants of chocolate cake on her plate. "I'm not joking," I insisted, my voice stronger now. "I've been sending that money since you called about your financial troubles 3 years ago. I can show you the bank statements." My mother's face flushed with anger. She reached across the table to pat Sarah's hand protectively. "Stop it, Abigail. Stop trying to steal your sister's credit. This is exactly like you, always jealous of Sarah's accomplishments." The injustice of her accusation hit me like a physical blow. 30 years of similar moments flashed through my mind. Sarah breaking my things, Sarah taking credit for my ideas, Sarah receiving praise for minimal effort while my achievements went unnoticed. And now, Sarah accepting recognition for my significant financial sacrifice. "You only sent 60 cents? My father suddenly shouted, loud enough that nearby diners turned to stare. His face had turned an alarming shade of red. Sarah sends $5,000 a month. I flinched at his volume, but held my ground. That was me. I repeated, my voice barely audible now. My mother's hand slammed against the table, rattling the silverware. Stop stealing her credit. Sarah finally looked up, meeting my eyes with a mixture of defiance and something that might have been shame. She said nothing to correct our parents. I stood up slowly, gathering my purse and jacket. With deliberate movements, I signed the $400 dinner receipt and added a generous tip. Then I placed the silver-framed photograph on the table. Happy anniversary, I said evenly before walking out of the restaurant without looking back. In my hotel room that night, I opened my banking app and canceled the automatic monthly transfer to my parents' account. 3 years and 36 payments were enough. The familiar mixture of guilt, relief, and sadness washed over me as I confirmed the cancellation, but underneath it all was something new, the steely resolve of someone who had finally reached her breaking point. Back in Boston, I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and bringing projects home on weekends. Anything to avoid the looming emotional reckoning. I didn't call my parents the following Sunday for our usual check-in. They didn't call me either. 2 weeks after the dinner, I finally scheduled an appointment with Dr. Levine, the therapist I'd been meaning to see for years. In her comfortable office overlooking Boston Common, I unloaded the full story of my family dynamics, starting with childhood memories and culminating in the anniversary dinner disaster. It sounds like you've been seeking validation from people who are fundamentally unable to provide it, she observed during our second session. What would it look like to stop trying? I couldn't answer immediately. The concept of completely releasing the hope for parental recognition was both terrifying and liberating. I don't know who I'd be without that effort, I admitted finally. It's been the background music of my entire life. Perhaps it's time to change the soundtrack, she suggested gently. The first of the month came and went. No $5,000 transfer left my account. I checked my phone obsessively that day, expecting immediate fallout, but there was only silence from Chicago. This wasn't surprising. They probably wouldn't notice until they checked their account or tried to make a major purchase. The call came 3 days later. My father's name flashing on my phone screen sent my heart racing, but I answered with a calm hello. Abigail, there seems to be a problem with the bank, he said without preamble. The monthly deposit didn't come through. It's not a bank error, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I canceled the transfer. Silence stretched between us for several seconds. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted from confusion to controlled anger. I don't understand what game you're playing. If this is about what happened at dinner. It's not a game, I interrupted. I've been making those transfers for 3 years while you believed they came from Sarah. I've decided to stop. Another long pause. I could hear him breathing. We'll discuss this when you're thinking more clearly, he finally said. Your mother and I are disappointed in this childish behavior. The call ended abruptly. I sat motionless, phone still in hand, waiting for the familiar wave of guilt and shame to crash over me. Instead, I felt an unexpected lightness, as if I'd put down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for years. The second month without payment brought more direct consequences. My mother left a tearful voicemail about overdue property taxes. My father sent a terse email listing their monthly expenses and the shortfall they now faced. Neither message acknowledged that I had been their financial support for 3 years, or that Sarah had accepted credit for my contributions. Then Sarah called, something she rarely did. What the hell, Abigail, she demanded when I answered. Mom and Dad are freaking out about money. They said you're throwing some kind of tantrum. Is that what they told you? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. They said you're suddenly claiming you were sending the money all this time, which is obviously crazy. I've been helping them since that first big commercial I booked. The blatant lie stunned me momentarily. What commercial, Sarah? The national one that keeps getting postponed? Or another imaginary booking you've been using to mislead them? I don't have to explain myself to you, she snapped. Actually, you do. You've been taking credit for my financial support for 3 years. $5,000 every month that came from my account, not yours. Sarah's tone changed, becoming cajoling. Okay, look, maybe I let them assume things sometimes. They were so proud of me finally contributing, and it made them happy. What's the harm? The harm, I repeated incredulously. You've been lying to them. I've been invisible, again, while you accepted praise for something you didn't do. Don't be so dramatic, she scoffed. It's just money. You're always showing off how successful you are anyway. Her dismissiveness ignited something in me. Just money? It's $180,000, Sarah. Money I earned. Money that delayed my own plans and goals. Money our parents desperately needed but couldn't acknowledge came from me because that wouldn't fit their narrative of Golden Sarah and Forgettable Abigail. That's not fair. No, it's not fair, I agreed, cutting her off. None of this has ever been fair. But it's over now. I ended the call feeling simultaneously drained and energized. That evening, I compiled 3 years of bank statements showing the regular transfers to my parents' account, scanned them and attached them to an email addressed to both my parents. I'm ready to discuss this when you are, I wrote in the body of the email. But the discussion needs to start with an acknowledgement of reality. The confrontation call came 2 days later. My mother called first, then immediately added my father to create a 3-way conversation. His voice boomed through the speaker. We've reviewed your bank statements, he began formally, as if addressing a business associate. There appears to be some truth to your claims. Some truth. I echoed. The statements show exactly what I told you. I've been sending $5,000 monthly for 3 years. That's $180,000 total. Yes, well, my mother interjected. If you were doing this, you should have been clearer about it. How were we supposed to know? The absurdity of her question left me momentarily speechless. How could they not know where a substantial monthly deposit was coming from? Did you ever ask Sarah directly? I finally managed. Did she ever show you proof of these transfers she was supposedly making? We didn't need to interrogate her, my father said defensively. She told us she was helping, and the money was appearing in our account. We had no reason to doubt her. No reason except that Sarah has never held a steady job, I pointed out. No reason except that she was supposedly sending you her entire income from sporadic commercial work. Did that really make sense to you? Silence from their end. I think, my mother finally said, her voice tight, that you're being very unkind to your sister. Perhaps she exaggerated her contribution, but she's been emotionally supportive during a difficult time. There it was, the familiar pattern. Even with irrefutable evidence, they were finding ways to minimize my contribution and defend Sarah. The realization was both painful and freeing. They would never see me clearly. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a fundamental inability to value me as they valued my sister. I'm not resuming the payments, I said firmly. I'm sorry you're facing financial difficulties, but I've done enough. So you're abandoning your family when we need you? My father asked, voice rising with indignation. After all we've done for you? The question hung in the air between us. After all they'd done for me? What exactly did they think that was? I'm not abandoning anyone, I replied calmly. I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference. The call ended shortly after, with no resolution, no acknowledgement of my feelings, and certainly no apology. But something had shifted inside me. For the first time in my life, I had stood my ground with my family and refused to accept their distorted version of reality. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a beginning. The month following our confrontation call was eerily quiet. No messages from my parents, no updates from Sarah, not even holiday planning discussions, though Thanksgiving was approaching. I maintained my silence as well, focusing on work, therapy sessions with Dr. Levine, and building stronger connections with friends in Boston. My Sunday evenings, previously dedicated to family calls, became my time for self-care, long baths, good books, and occasionally dinner with colleagues who were becoming friends. The absence of weekly family stress was noticeably beneficial. I slept better. The persistent tension in my shoulders eased. Even my team at work commented on my more relaxed demeanor. Then Sarah's social media posts began appearing on my feed, carefully crafted messages about supporting family through difficult times and being the responsible one. Without naming me directly, she painted herself as the victim of family drama, the one keeping everyone together while dealing with unnamed relatives' selfishness. Each post received dozens of sympathetic comments from friends who knew nothing of the actual situation. I resisted the urge to respond publicly. Such engagement would only feed the narrative she was creating. Instead, I muted her accounts and continued my policy of disengagement. Nearly 6 weeks after I'd stopped the payments, my mother called on a Tuesday evening. Her voice was subdued, lacking its usual confident tone. "Abigail," she began, "I hope you're doing well." The formality was unusual. Our conversations typically started with immediate updates about her life or questions about when I'd next visit. "I'm fine," I replied, waiting for her real purpose in calling. After some hesitant small talk about Chicago weather and a neighbor's new landscaping, she finally reached her point. "Your father and I have been discussing our financial situation," she said carefully. "Things are becoming quite difficult without the monthly contribution." "I understand," I said, neither offering help nor expressing regret. Her next words came in a rush. "We were wondering if you might reconsider your decision. Perhaps a smaller amount would be possible. We've cut expenses significantly, but the mortgage is still challenging." The request was predictable, but her approach, direct acknowledgement that they needed my help rather than Sarah's, represented a tiny step toward honesty. "I'm not comfortable resuming payments," I said gently but firmly. "I supported you for 3 years without acknowledgement while Sarah took credit for my sacrifice. That pattern isn't healthy for any of us. But we're acknowledging it now," she pressed. "We understand it was you all along." "Understanding and acknowledging are different things, Mom," I pointed out. "You haven't actually thanked me for what I did, nor apologized for believing Sarah instead of me." The silence on her end spoke volumes. "We're your parents, Abigail," she finally said, her tone hardening slightly. "We shouldn't have to beg." "This isn't about begging," I explained. "It's about respect and truth. I need both if we're going to have a relationship moving forward." The call ended soon after, with nothing resolved. 3 days later, my father sent a lengthy email that began as a list of their financial obligations and deteriorated into accusations about my vindictive behavior and how I was punishing them for preferring Sarah's personality. The email concluded with, "I never thought my own daughter would enjoy watching her parents struggle." I didn't respond. There was no point engaging with such a fundamentally distorted perspective. Through mutual family friends, I learned that my parents were putting their house on the market, the 5-bedroom suburban home where I'd grown up, with its carefully maintained garden and updated kitchen. They were downsizing to a 2-bedroom condo closer to downtown Chicago. The news brought a complex mix of emotions: sadness for their necessary lifestyle adjustment, guilt about my role in their circumstances, but also a sense that this reckoning had been long overdue. Sarah, meanwhile, was reportedly scrambling to find full-time employment in Los Angeles. According to her social media, she had secured a position as an administrative assistant at a talent agency, far from the acting career she'd pursued, but a steady paycheck for perhaps the first time in her adult life. These changes stirred conflicting feelings. I never wanted my family to struggle, yet there was undeniable satisfaction in seeing reality finally catch up with them. The fantasy they'd maintained, of Sarah's success and generosity, of their financial stability, had been unsustainable. Perhaps facing truth, however painful, was the only path forward for all of us. In Boston, my life continued to evolve in positive directions. Without the emotional and financial drain of supporting my family, I reconnected with parts of myself I'd neglected. I joined a weekend hiking group, rediscovering my college love of outdoor activities. I accepted speaking engagements at healthcare conferences I'd previously declined due to cost concerns. I even began preliminary research for the healthcare consulting firm I'd dreamed of launching. Most significantly, I met Michael Sullivan at a hospital fundraiser where I was presenting data visualization tools for patient outcomes. A pediatric surgeon with kind eyes and an easy laugh, he approached me after my presentation with thoughtful questions about applying the technology to pediatric cases. Our professional conversation over coffee the following week evolved into dinner the next weekend, then regular dates that felt refreshingly different from my previous relationships. Michael listened when I spoke. He remembered details about my work and interests. When I finally shared abbreviated versions of my family history, he didn't offer platitudes or dismissive assurances that all families have problems. "That sounds incredibly painful," he said instead. "And you deserved better." His simple validation was more healing than he could know. With Michael, I experienced what healthy relationships actually felt like: mutual respect, balanced give and take, genuine interest in each other's lives. Our connection deepened over shared values around healthcare improvement and surprisingly compatible personalities despite our different specialties. My friends noticed the change in me. Julia, my closest friend in Boston, commented during our monthly dinner, "You seem lighter somehow. More present. I feel like I'm finally living my life instead of reacting to my family's drama," I admitted. "It's both terrifying and wonderful." As Thanksgiving approached, the traditional family gathering loomed as a question mark. No invitations had been extended from Chicago. I made plans to join Michael's family celebration instead, then experienced unexpected anxiety about this further separation from my family traditions. Dr. Levine helped me navigate these complicated feelings during our sessions. "Guilt doesn't mean you've done something wrong," she reminded me. "Often it's the emotional residue of breaking unhealthy patterns. The question is, do you want to make decisions based on guilt or based on what's genuinely good for you?" The answer seemed obvious when framed that way, yet I still struggled with complete disconnection from my family. Despite everything, they were still my parents. Sarah was still my sister. Could I really excise them from my life entirely? "Setting boundaries isn't the same as cutting people off," Dr. Levine said when I expressed this concern. "You're not saying they can't be in your life. You're saying they can't be in your life on the old terms." This distinction resonated deeply. I didn't want to orphan myself. I wanted healthier relationships with my family, if that was possible. The uncertainty of this possibility created a lingering sadness beneath my newfound independence. 3 days before Thanksgiving, I received an unexpected visitor at my condo. The intercom buzzed while I was preparing dinner, and the doorman announced, "An Aunt Caroline here to see you, Ms. Mitchell." Aunt Caroline, my mother's older sister. We'd never been particularly close, though she'd always been kind during family gatherings. What was she doing in Boston without warning? I buzzed her up, quickly tidying the kitchen counter and smoothing my hair. When I opened the door, I was struck by how much she resembled my mother, yet with softer features and eyes that crinkled warmly when she smiled. "Abigail," she greeted me, pulling me into a hug that smelled of familiar family perfume. "I hope you don't mind the surprise visit. I was in New York for a conference and thought I'd take the train up to see you." "Of course not," I said, genuinely pleased despite my confusion. "Please, come in." Over tea at my kitchen island, we exchanged pleasantries about her work as a university administrator and my healthcare projects. Then, after a natural lull in conversation, she placed her cup down with purpose. "I should be honest about why I'm here," she said. "I've heard about the situation with your parents and Sarah. Your mother called me quite upset." My defenses immediately rose. "Did she send you to convince me to resume the payments?" "No," Caroline shook her head firmly. "I'm not here as her emissary. I'm here because I've watched this family dynamic play out for decades, and I think you deserve to understand some things about your mother that might help make sense of it all." For the next hour, Aunt Caroline revealed family history I'd never known. My mother had grown up in the shadow of her own younger sister, Rebecca, Caroline's twin, who had been beautiful, charming, and the clear favorite of their parents. Rebecca had died suddenly from an undiagnosed heart condition at 19, sending my grandparents into a grief from which they never fully recovered. Diane was the responsible one, the steady one, Caroline explained, using my mother's first name. But Rebecca was the star. After Rebecca died, your grandparents virtually ignored Diane's existence. Their grief consumed them completely. When my mother met and married my father a few years later, she was desperate to create the perfect family she'd never had. Then Sarah was born. Sarah resembled Rebecca remarkably, Caroline continued. The same blonde hair, the same expressive features. I saw it immediately, though your mother never acknowledged it consciously. From that moment, Sarah became the repository of all your mother's unresolved longing for her sister and for her parents' approval. The revelation stunned me. My mother's favoritism towards Sarah wasn't simply preference or personality compatibility. It was psychological projection rooted in profound grief and longing. Why didn't anyone ever tell me this? I asked, trying to process this new perspective. Your mother refuses to discuss Rebecca, even with me, Caroline replied sadly. I think acknowledging the connection would mean confronting too much pain. And Richard. She paused, referring to my father. Richard simply followed Diane's lead. He learned early in their marriage that keeping her happy meant embracing her preferences, including her focus on Sarah. So I was doomed from the start, I said quietly. I could never compete with a ghost. No, you couldn't, Caroline agreed. But that's not your failure, Abigail. It's your parents. Children shouldn't have to compete for love at all. She reached across the counter to squeeze my hand. I'm not telling you this to excuse their behavior. Nothing justifies how they've treated you or the situation with the money. I'm telling you because understanding might help you move forward without carrying their dysfunction as your burden. After Caroline left, I sat by my window overlooking the Charles River, watching lights reflect on the dark water as I processed our conversation. The revelation about my mother's sister didn't erase years of hurt, but it provided context I'd never had before. My parents weren't simply malicious or deliberately cruel. They were damaged people repeating patterns from their own painful histories. This understanding didn't obligate me to resume financial support or accept their behavior, but it did open a possible path toward a different kind of relationship. One based on adult recognition of our shared humanity rather than continued expectation of the parent-child dynamic that had failed me. The next morning, I called Aunt Caroline before her return to New York. I've been thinking about what you shared, I told her. I want to try addressing this directly with my parents, but I don't think they'll listen to me alone. What are you proposing? She asked. Family therapy, I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke. With a professional mediator. Would you help me approach them about it? Her agreement was immediate and supportive. Together, we developed a strategy. Caroline would visit my parents the following weekend, use her unique position as my mother's sister to encourage openness, and propose the therapy session as a way to heal the family rift rather than as an accusation of wrongdoing. To my surprise, my parents cautiously agreed. Sarah initially refused to participate, claiming she had nothing to do with our conflict, but eventually relented when my father insisted her presence was necessary. 2 weeks later, we gathered in the Chicago office of Dr. Marshall, a family therapist with experience in intergenerational trauma. The atmosphere was tense, with Sarah avoiding eye contact, my mother sitting rigidly, and my father checking his watch repeatedly. I felt simultaneously anxious and determined. Dr. Marshall established ground rules. Each person would have uninterrupted time to speak. Accusations would be reframed as personal experiences. Everyone would practice active listening. Simple guidelines that felt revolutionary in our family context. The session began painfully. with my father minimizing the situation as a financial disagreement blown out of proportion, and my mother speaking about feeling abandoned by my decision to stop payments. Sarah claimed she'd been dragged into family drama that wasn't her fault. When my turn came, I took a deep breath and spoke from my heart. For as long as I can remember, I felt invisible in our family, I began. My achievements were expected while Sarah's were celebrated. My contributions were taken for granted while hers were praised. The monthly payments were just the most extreme example of a lifelong pattern. I described specific memories: science fair projects ignored, academic honors unacknowledged, personal milestones overshadowed by Sarah's activities. I explained how I'd continued seeking their approval through achievement, financial success, and ultimately by supporting them financially, only to have that support attributed to Sarah. I don't need to be the favorite, I concluded, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. I just needed to be seen. To be valued for who I actually am, not measured against Sarah or anyone else. The silence following my words was profound. My father stared at the floor, his earlier defensiveness replaced by what appeared to be genuine discomfort. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Sarah looked stricken, perhaps hearing for the first time the cumulative impact of our family dynamic from my perspective. Dr. Marshall gently guided the conversation forward, helping my parents respond to what they'd heard rather than defaulting to their usual dismissals. My father spoke first, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I never realized," he began, then stopped, swallowing hard. "I never intended for you to feel less than. I thought pushing you was helping you succeed. You were always so capable, so independent." Sarah seemed to need more attention, more support. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was the first acknowledgement of my experience I could remember receiving from him. My mother struggled more, initially deflecting with statements about how all parents have favorites sometimes, before Dr. Marshall redirected her to address my specific points. The breakthrough came unexpectedly from Sarah. After listening to our parents' halting responses, she suddenly burst out, "I knew it wasn't fair. I always knew you treated Abigail differently, but it benefited me, so I never said anything." She turned to me directly for the first time. "I didn't know about the money. Dad called when the first payment arrived, asking if I'd sent it. I just let them believe what they wanted to believe. It was easier than admitting I couldn't help them." Her honesty, however belated, cracked something open in our family facade. My mother began crying in earnest, not the controlled tears she typically allowed herself, but deep, body-shaking sobs. My father put his arm around her awkwardly, his own eyes wet. "I see Rebecca in Sarah," my mother finally admitted through tears. "I always have. I didn't think it affected how I treated you, Abigail, but clearly it did. I'm so sorry." It was the first genuine apology I'd ever received from her. The 2-hour session didn't magically resolve decades of dysfunction, but it initiated a process. Dr. Marshall recommended regular family sessions and individual therapy for my mother specifically to address her unresolved grief about her sister. Before we left, we scheduled a follow-up session for the following month. In the lobby afterward, my father approached me tentatively. "The financial situation is our problem to solve, not yours," he said quietly. "We've listed the house and found a reasonable condo. We'll manage." I nodded, grateful for this acknowledgement of boundaries. My mother hugged me before I left for the airport, holding on longer than usual. "I do love you, Abigail," she whispered. "I haven't shown it well, but I do." I couldn't promise immediate forgiveness or trust, but I could acknowledge her effort. "I know," I replied simply. "I love you too." On the flight back to Boston, I felt neither triumphant nor completely healed, but something equally important, hopeful. For the first time, my family had seen me, really seen me, and begun to acknowledge their role in my pain. It wasn't everything, but it was a beginning. 6 months have passed since that first family therapy session in Chicago. The transformation hasn't been magical or instantaneous, but the changes have been real and meaningful. Like renovating an old house with structural damage, rebuilding our family relationships has required demolishing unhealthy patterns before constructing something new and more stable. My parents sold their house and moved into a modest 2-bedroom condo near Lake Michigan. The downsizing was difficult for them emotionally, but financially necessary. My father, who had taken an early retirement 3 years ago, returned to consulting part-time. My mother, who had primarily been a homemaker, found purpose volunteering at a community arts program. Their lifestyle is significantly less comfortable than before, but for the first time in their adult lives, they are living within their means rather than on borrowed money or someone else's support. Sarah's journey has perhaps been the most surprising. After our confrontation in therapy, she seemed to experience a genuine awakening about her role in our family dynamic. She secured a full-time position in marketing at the talent agency where she'd been working administratively. Though she occasionally auditions for commercial work, she's begun building a real career rather than chasing the Hollywood dream that was partially fueled by our parents' excessive admiration. More significantly, Sarah reached out to me privately, requesting a conversation without our parents' involvement. Over video chat, she offered an apology that felt authentic rather than performative. "I always knew I was treated preferentially," she admitted. "I told myself you didn't mind because you were so capable and independent. It was easier than acknowledging I was benefiting from something unfair. We were both children when it started," I reminded her. "Neither of us created the dynamic. But I perpetuated it as an adult," she countered. "Especially with the money situation. I'm truly sorry, Abigail." This conversation marked the beginning of a tentative new relationship between us, not yet close friends, but no longer locked in the unhealthy competitive dynamic of our childhood. We now text occasionally, sharing brief updates about work or sending funny memes. It's a small beginning, but an authentic one. My monthly family therapy sessions continue, though now conducted via video conference. Dr. Marshall has helped us establish new communication patterns and expectations. My parents are learning, albeit slowly, to relate to me as an adult with valid perspectives rather than as a perpetual child whose feelings can be dismissed. I'm learning to express my needs directly rather than silently building resentment when those needs aren't met. In April, Michael proposed during a weekend hiking trip in the White Mountains. The simple platinum ring with its single diamond isn't ostentatious, but its symbolism is profound. A commitment to partnership built on mutual respect and genuine love rather than obligation or imbalanced giving. When I called my parents to share the news, their response was markedly different from their historical pattern. Instead of immediately asking how this would affect my availability to help them or comparing my relationship to Sarah's dating life, my mother simply said, "We're so happy for you, Abigail. Michael sounds wonderful." My father added, "We'd like to contribute to the wedding, whatever we can manage. You deserve a beautiful day." The offer wasn't necessary. Michael and I can afford the small celebration we're planning, but the gesture represented a meaningful shift in their perspective. For perhaps the first time, they were focusing on giving to me rather than taking or expecting. Our wedding plans include both family and boundaries. My parents will attend, as will Sarah and Aunt Caroline. But we've designed the event to minimize family stress, with separate accommodations and limited opportunities for old dynamics to resurface. Michael's warm, functional family will provide a buffer and model of healthier interactions. Throughout this process of family reconstruction, I've continued my personal therapy with Dr. Levine. Her guidance has been invaluable in helping me process the complex emotions of this transition, hope tempered with caution, forgiveness that doesn't erase accountability, love that can coexist with disappointment. Family healing isn't linear, she reminded me during a recent session. There will be setbacks, moments when old patterns resurface. The difference now is that you have the tools to recognize those patterns and the strength to maintain your boundaries. Her words proved prophetic last month when my father called with subtle hints about their struggling to cover property taxes on the new condo. My old instinct to immediately solve their problem surfaced instantly, but instead of offering money, I simply listened and expressed sympathy for their situation. When he asked directly if I might help out just this once, I calmly declined, reminding him of our agreement about financial boundaries. His disappointment was evident, but not accompanied by the manipulation or anger that would have characterized such a conversation in the past. Progress, not perfection. As I prepare for my wedding and consider the possibility of starting my own family in the coming years, I'm acutely aware of the generational patterns I don't want to repeat. Michael and I have had extensive conversations about parenting philosophies, agreeing that if we have children, we will work consciously to treat them as individuals rather than extensions of ourselves or solutions to our unresolved needs. Looking at old family photos recently, I came across one from my high school graduation, my parents flanking me in my cap and gown, Sarah standing slightly apart. In the past, this image would have triggered immediate pain, highlighting my perception of standing alone despite being physically surrounded by family. Now, I can see it with more nuanced understanding, from perfect people doing their best with the emotional tools they had at the time. This shift in perspective doesn't justify the hurt or erase the consequences of our family dysfunction. But it does allow me to move forward without carrying the weight of bitterness alongside the lessons I've learned. The most profound realization of this journey has been understanding that self-worth cannot come from external validation, not from parents, not from siblings, not even from partners or friends. True security comes from within, from knowing your own value even when others fail to recognize it. I still sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd never stood up for myself at that anniversary dinner, if I'd continued the payments indefinitely while Sarah received the credit. Would I have eventually become completely invisible, even to myself? The thought makes me shudder. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's an act of self-respect that ultimately benefits everyone involved. These truths seem obvious now, but they required painful experience to truly learn. If you're watching this and recognizing similar patterns in your own family, please know that you deserve to be seen, to be valued, to be treated with basic respect. Finding your voice might be the hardest thing you'll ever do, but on the other side of that courage is a freedom that's worth every difficult moment. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more content like this. And remember, healing family relationships starts with honoring your own worth. Thank you for listening to my story.